The Earthen Vessel, forging indestructible pottery from mud, bone, and fire. Walk into your kitchen and open your cabinets. Look at your stainless steel pots, your glass mason jars, and your stack of plastic storage containers. In our modern, industrialized world, we take the ability to hold and store things completely for granted. We assume that if we need to boil water, we will always have a metal pot. If we need to store grain, we will always have a plastic bucket. But this is a dangerous illusion. Plastic becomes brittle and shatters in the freezing cold. Glass drops and breaks into 1,000 useless pieces. Metal pots eventually rust, warp, and corrode. When the global supply chains freeze and the factories stop stamping out cheap steel and plastic, how will you boil water to purify it? How will you cook a stew over an open fire? How will you protect your harvested seeds from mice and moisture? Without fireproof, waterproof containers, human survival is impossible. You cannot cup your hands over a fire to boil water. When your last metal pot rusts through, you must know how to return to the earth. Today, we're going to unlock the ancient, forgotten alchemy of wild pottery. We're going to learn how to forge indestructible, fireproof cooking vessels out of raw mud, crushed bone, and the ferocious heat of an open pit fire. The first step in forging an earthen vessel is not building a fire. It is hunting for the earth's hidden blood, wild clay. You cannot make pottery out of regular topsoil. Topsoil is filled with decaying organic matter, roots, and loose dirt. If you try to bake it, it will simply crumble to dust. You must dig deeper. Wild clay is incredibly dense, heavy, and typically found in the subsoil, along the cut banks of winding rivers, or exposed in the roots of massive fallen trees. It comes in a spectrum of brilliant colors: iron-rich reds, deep blues, and pale, ghost-like grays. To test if the mud you have found is true clay, ancient survivalists used the ribbon test. You take a handful of the wet earth, roll it into a thick cigar shape, and use your thumb to press it out into a thin, flat ribbon hanging over your finger. If it breaks off immediately, it is just dirt and sand. But if it stretches, holding its shape for 2 or 3 inches before bending, you have found a vein of pure, high-quality clay. You harvest this heavy, wet earth and carry it back to your camp. But raw, pure clay is actually a trap. It is too pure. If you shape a bowl out of pure wild clay and throw it into a fire, the microscopic water molecules trapped inside the dense crystal structure will rapidly turn to steam. The steam expands violently, and the bowl will literally explode into shrapnel. To forge a vessel that can survive a 1,000-degree fire, you must master the chemistry of grog. Grog is a tempering agent. It is an aggregate material that opens up the microscopic pores of the clay, allowing steam to escape safely during the firing process, and preventing the clay from shrinking and cracking as it dries. In the modern world, potters buy processed ceramic powders, but in the wild, our ancestors used what the environment provided. They went to the river and gathered crushed mussel shells, or they used the leftover, calcined bones from their animal hunts. You take the dry, brittle animal bones from your campfire and grind them between 2 heavy river stones until they become a coarse, white powder. You mix this bone dust or river sand into your wet clay. You knead the earth and the bone together with your bare hands, pushing, folding, and wedging the heavy mud until every air bubble is violently forced out. The clay transforms, it loses its sticky, unpredictable nature and becomes a tough, resilient, biological dough. Now the architecture begins. You do not need a mechanized spinning pottery wheel. For thousands of years, the greatest vessels on Earth were built using the slow, methodical coil method. You take a lump of your bone-tempered clay and roll it between your palms into a long, thick rope. You lay the rope down in a tight spiral to form the flat base of your pot. Then, you continue stacking the clay ropes on top of each other, building the walls higher and higher. As you stack, you use a smooth piece of wood or a rounded river pebble to scrape the inside and outside of the walls. You pull the clay upward, fusing the coils together, erasing the lines, and compressing the earth into a thin, tight, uniform shell. Once the vessel is shaped, you use a smooth, polished stone to burnish the outside. You rub the stone aggressively over the semi-dry clay until the surface begins to shine like glass. This aligns the microscopic clay particles, creating a naturally waterproof barrier without the need for synthetic glazes. But the vessel is still just dry mud. If you pour water into it now, it will melt back into a puddle of sludge. You must enact the final transformation. You must subject the earth to the dragon's breath, the pit fire. You cannot fire pottery in a normal campfire. The temperature fluctuates too wildly, and the cold wind will cause the pots to crack from thermal shock. You must build an underground kiln. You dig a deep, wide pit in the earth. You line the bottom with a thick bed of dry sawdust, dried animal manure, and small twigs. You gently place your bone-dry clay vessels into the center of the pit. Then, you completely bury the pots in highly combustible fuel, dry pine cones, thick hardwood logs, and more dried manure. You light the fire from the top. As the fire burns down, it creates a massive, insulated bed of extreme, glowing red heat. The temperature inside the pit skyrockets, climbing to over 1,000 degrees Celsius, or 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. You cover the top of the pit with pieces of scrap metal or flat rocks, suffocating the fire slightly, trapping the intense thermal energy underground. Inside that roaring inferno, a profound chemical metamorphosis takes place. The microscopic water molecules that are chemically bound to the clay crystals are violently driven out. The silica in the earth and the calcium from the bone dust begin to melt and fuse together. The mud physically transforms into a ceramic stone. It is a one-way chemical street. Once fired, the clay can never become mud again. You let the pit burn out and cool slowly for 24 hours. When you finally dig through the white ashes and pull your vessel from the earth, it will be streaked with beautiful, chaotic clouds of black, orange, and deep red from the smoke and flames. You flick the rim of the pot with your fingernail, and instead of a dull thud, it rings with a clear, sharp, high-pitched resonance. It sounds like a bell. You have done it. You have taken wet dirt and the discarded bones of a hunt, and you have forged an indestructible, fireproof container. You can set this pot directly into the glowing coals of your hearth to boil river water and make it safe to drink. You can fill it with harvested seeds and bury it in the ground, knowing mice cannot chew through its stone walls. When the modern supply chains rust away and the fragile glass and plastic of the old world crumble into dust, the unprepared will have no way to carry water or cook their food. But you will not be afraid. You will walk to the riverbank, plunge your hands into the heavy, wet clay, and you will forge your own survival. You have broken your dependence on the factory. You have learned how to mold the very earth itself into the ultimate tool of human endurance.